Good afternoon, Ms. D. It's good to see you again.
Hello, Mr. Brown.
Could you please state your full name for the jury?
Latasha Renee Dia.
Ms. D, where do you work?
I work at what state, city,
What company
company?
do you work for?
I work for Contour Companies.
And where are you based out of?
I am based out of Bloomfield Hills, Michigan.
Is that where Contour is based out of as well?
Correct.
How long have you worked for Contour?
Oh, about 11 years now, since 2013.
What is your position with Contour?
I am the VP of Property Management.
How long have you been the VP of Property Management?
Maybe 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
What was your position prior to that?
I was the Director of Property Management prior to.
So in your role as Director of Property Management and Vice President of Property Management, at some point, did you have responsibilities pertaining to the Eastwick Village townhomes?
Correct, yes.
And Eastwick is a apartment complex in DeKalb County, Georgia, right?
Correct.
Now, as part of your responsibilities at Eastwick, were you responsible for the staffing of the property?
Yes.
Meaning hiring and firing different employees and determining how much staff was necessary?
Positioning property managers and assisting in the hiring of maintenance, hiring the right people for the positions to hire on-site leasing staff and on-site staff.
And the on-site staff, you mentioned the on-site property manager. The property manager was the highest ranking on-site employee at Eastwick, correct?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, the property manager was the highest ranking on-site staff member at Eastwick, right?
Correct.
And they reported directly to you?
Correct.
You were also responsible for hiring and firing of courtesy officers?
That would have been the on-site property manager's job.
One of those on-site property managers, do you recall a property manager by the name of Bradley Payne?
I do recall that his position when we took over the property was a resident coordinator. Yes.
Is it your testimony that Bradley was never the property manager at Eastwick?
That is not my testimony, that I'm saying he never was the property manager. I just don't recall his levels of transition. I know he started out as resident coordinator. He was an assistant property manager. Going on to being a property manager, I don't recall that exactly. Now, I do recall, I know you didn't ask this question, that within his email, he did, right before leaving the property, change his email to property manager, but he was not officiated with an offer letter as property manager.
When was Bradley employed at Eastwick?
Mr. Bradley, he actually was with the property prior to our takeover or acquisition of the property. So he was hired in from the previous company with our company.
That acquisition, Contour's acquisition of Eastwick took place in late 2017, correct?
Sometime in 2017, correct.
So Bradley was employed at the property in some form or fashion from 2017 up until when? When did Bradley leave?
I do not recall the dates of when Bradley Payne left the company.
Do you recall Bradley being employed at the property in 2018?
Yes, I believe he was there for longer than a year.
And what about early 2019?
I don't recall.
Bradley was a good employee, wasn't he?
I would say he was a pretty good employee.
He was also a good person in general and very knowledgeable about the property.
I can't speak to him as a person in general because I didn't know him personally. But he did have very good knowledge on the property, which is why we asked for him to join us, join our team once we acquired the property.
Part of that, Bradley would regularly email you about things going on at the property.
Not necessarily. He would communicate with the on-site property manager at the time.
Are you saying you never sent or received emails with Bradley?
That's not what I said. I believe the question, if I could say, was that he always emailed me, which was not the case. His job was to report to the on-site property manager.
There were, however, times that Bradley would email with you, right?
Correct. Yes, correct.
Do you recall in 2018 Bradley emailing you about an employee who was worried about the security at the property?
I do not recall the email and specifically, no.
Share my screen with you.
Okay.
You will, are you able to see this?
Yes, sir.
Take a second to familiarize yourself with it, and then I want to ask you some questions about it.
Yes, sir. So is the beginning of the message at the bottom or the top of this email? That's,
Make it
yeah.
easier. Let's start from the bottom up and just let me know when you're done reading.
Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. I'm ready for the next segment. Okay. Okay, I'm ready for the next.
And so this email sent on Wednesday, February 21st, 2018. Looks like it came from Bradley at contourdevelopmentgroup.com.
Correct. Was there more to this email? I thought I saw a different.
So this was what was provided to us by your attorneys.
Okay.
And under the to section, it's to Latasha Dia. And in the email, it identifies Bradley Payne as the property manager at Eastwick, correct?
Correct. That's what he says.
But in this email, Latasha, and you don't dispute that you received this email, right?
No, it looks like our that's my signature at the bottom, and yeah, this is an email.
And in this email, Bradley references someone being a good employee. He just worries about security at this property. You see that?
Mm-hmm. I do.
On receiving this email, do you recall, did that concern you at all?
I don't know what the remainder of this email is or if there was a follow-up call behind that, Mr. Brown. This is just a piece to, I'm assuming would be a larger conversation. But from what I could read in the three segments here was that there was a dispute between employees, one being security at the site, and then maybe it would have been a maintenance. It does not specify here. So I do not know exactly what the basis of the email is, but in the last email, what it sounds like is that if Bradley was not able to resolve the internal issue, that he would lose both the security guy and whomever he's referencing.
Was this the first time that anyone had ever expressed concern to you about security at Eastwood?
No, no, sir.
Bradley also asked you for additional security officers at the property, right?
I don't recall him asking for that or what timeline that would have been. Was that when we initially took over the property, Mr. Brown? What timeline was that?
Is it your testimony that you don't recall Bradley ever asking for additional security at the property?
Additional, that will give me a basis point of how many we had at the time. So I'm not saying he never asked. I just don't know at what point during our time there that he did ask. That you're referencing.
So did Bradley or any other employee at the property ever ask for additional courtesy officers or security at the property?
I can't say for sure additional, but I do know that they've asked and we provided courtesy officers. And Mr. Brown, I really want to answer these questions that you have. It's just been a really long time. So if I don't recall something, please forgive me. I will do my best to answer the best I can.
And I appreciate that. You recall giving testimony previously in this case?
I do. I had my first deposition in this case.
And it was on Zoom just like this, right?
Correct. Yes.
Your lawyer was there.
Correct.
I was there.
Yes.
Court reporter was there.
Correct.
You took an oath to tell the truth,
That is correct.
just like you did today.
Yes.
Show you. I'll scroll up to the beginning. The transcript of your deposition that was taken almost 3 years ago on April 22nd, 2021. And I'm going to go to page 86, lines 20 through 24, I believe. If you will, just read silently with me while I read aloud.
You said you're going to read out loud, sir?
Yes, line 20.
Okay.
Did anyone ever ask you for additional security? Your answer, courtesy officers, question mark. Yes, courtesy officers. Your answer was not to my knowledge. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, sir, you did.
But as we sit here today, you recall there being employees asking you for courtesy officers.
Additional courtesy officers, I do not recall that, Mr. Brown. For courtesy officers, yes, correct. And I will say that that was my first deposition, and I was a little intimidated by your questioning, but I understood the process. But yes, that is correct. They did ask for courtesy officers. Additional, I do not know if they asked for additional courtesy officers, Mr. Brown.
Let me show you another email that was provided to us by your attorneys.
Okay.
Take a moment to read this and familiarize yourself with it. Then I want to ask you about a few things in here.
Yes, sir. All set.
So this is another email from Bradley Payne identifying himself as the property manager, correct?
Correct, but now he has additional letters behind his name for some reason in this email. It always changed with him, honestly.
This is another email from Bradley Payne to you, right?
That's what it says. Yes, sir.
Sent on Thursday, March 22nd, 2018 at 12:59 p.m.
That's what it says.
And the title of this email is Eastwick Security, right?
That is correct. Was there a response?
If Bradley wasn't the property manager, why didn't you tell him to change his email signature?
I have no idea. I really, honestly, Bradley was a free spirit and we respected his passion for the property and we just left it at that. His pay did not change. Again, there was no offer letter if we're discussing his title. What we found is titles are very important to our southern properties, whether they have additional pay or not. But that was not an offer from the company to this employee at the time. And may I ask, was there a response from my email back to Mr. Bradley in regards to this?
Well, Natasha, I'm just going on what was provided to us by your attorneys.
Yes, sir.
This email from Bradley, it's referencing security at Eastwick, right?
Correct.
In the first paragraph, he's referencing the security officers coming to him about pay and compensation, right?
Correct.
At this time at Eastwick, how were security officers paid?
They were on payroll and they also had an additional up to $8,000 to $10,000 savings with free rent in most cases. But at this time, I do not know whom we had in place at this time, but I do know courtesy officers. We had more, we had less. It just changed. It was a moving needle regarding employees for courtesy officers.
Bradley's referencing also about the issues that the courtesy officer is having.
I see that in the second paragraph. Yes, sir.
Breaking up fights, residents and guests with guns, filming music videos. He goes on to say this is a lot for one officer to handle with what he is getting compensated for.
What was there a question?
And Bradley goes
Mr.
on
Brown?
to tell you that he's about to lose all the officers, and we can't afford to have this happen. It will only get worse in the upcoming summer months. And then here in the next paragraph, he suggests 3 guards with 8-hour shifts and needing to hire 1 more officer. Do you see that?
I do.
The last line from Bradley here says, please help me. Do you
That
recall
sounds like
what your
Bradley.
response to that was?
I do not, sir. Again, it's been many years since this, and this is why I asked if there was a response email that I can verify. I would love to look further into whom we had as courtesy officers. I do recall making changes in regards to courtesy officers. I just cannot recall timelines and or where, but um, the first 2 years of us acquiring the property, there was a lot of cleanup for us to do. I mean, myself, property managers, we evicted more than 200 residents from the property as a part of our cleanup. So yes, the courtesy officers would have to intervene and do the basic needs of the property. But this sounds more like the courtesy officer wanted more pay. And it also sounds, it's a two-part, sounds like Mr. Payne, Bradley Payne, wanted additional courtesy officer.
You just said that you would like to look into this some more. You've had 4 years to look into this, haven't you?
From my last deposition, Mr. Brown?
You've had 4 years while this case has been going on.
To be honest, Mr. Brown, after my first deposition, I don't know how this works, and I wasn't expecting to circle back around to this case. But had I known that I would be here with you on today, Mr. Brown, I would have had that research done. Yes, sir.
You didn't know we were going to be here today?
Not 4 years ago.
But you've had those 4 years to do that research, right?
I'm not sure how I should answer that, Mr. Brown. I did not know for 4 years that I would be with you here today.
The issues that Bradley represents, that he mentions in here about breaking up fights and the residents and guests with guns, is that concerning to you?
Yes, sir. That is concerning to me, and it should be concern to any property manager.
You also said Bradley was really passionate about the property, right?
He had his moments, like any other employee, but yes, for the most part, he was passionate about the property, about anything that he did.
And so when somebody is passionate about the property, as Bradley Payne was, is saying, please help me, we need to hire 1 more officer. Did you do that?
I can't say for sure, again, the timeline. If I had the emails or communication and or the payroll ledger of employees and how it may have increased after this timeline, I would be able to answer that, Mr. Brown. You know, again, Mr. Payne was passionate about everything that happened on the property, good or bad.
You had to give all of your emails related to this to your lawyers, right?
Correct.
So wouldn't you know whether there's a response email or not?
Which is why I'm also curious, Mr. Brown. There should have been a response from my email to Mr. Payne. Otherwise, maybe I had called him and resolved the issue by phone, but I don't want to say that I didn't hear this concern of Bradley's and did not address the concern. I just don't have a way to prove that here today without another email or conversation um, between Bradley and I and/or payroll records showing that we may have made some improvements after this email.
What type of investigation did you do after this email about the issues that Bradley referenced?
I do not know, Mr. Brown. Again, this was in 2018, and I'm sure something transpired with action on behalf of management. I just can't say exactly what those items were, but as I continue um, progress onto the property, we did make changes as we saw fit in regards to anything that the property managers addressed with us and needed.
But as we sit here today, you can't tell us whether you hired an additional officer per Bradley's request?
I'm sure I hired some officers. I can't say for sure if it was per Bradley's request or the actual property manager's request. I also can't verify the timeline in which we hired additional courtesy officers because I don't have those payroll records in front of me to verify dates. It may have already been in process during this time. It may have already been a previous conversation, or it may have happened well after this time. I cannot verify that, but I can say that between everything that we were doing on the property, it was moving in this direction of cleaning the property from all of these lease violations is what I hear in this second paragraph. The fights and the guests with guns, our lease clearly states that none of these things are allowed on the property, Mr. Brown.
Well, people fighting and carrying around guns, that's not just a lease violation, that's a crime, right?
It is against the lease agreement to carry a weapon onto the property. So yes, all of those things are lease violations is what I read in the email, sir. And it said guest. I'm quite curious as to why, it didn't say resident, but guest. So I'm sure we took the same precautions in rectifying those situations.
What precautions can you, as we sit here today, what precautions can you tell us that you took following this email to rectify these situations that Bradley's referencing?
I can't say following this email, but I can say from the start of us acquiring the property, Mr. Brown, it started with our initial background checks and applications and everything that goes into the lease agreement, including, but not limited to things like lease violations and evictions. And, there's so many things that property managers are allowed to do should our residents violate the lease, which everything in the lease also applies to their guests as well.
So after this email about there being residents and guests with guns, did you guys evict anyone for having firearms?
I didn't personally. I'm sure the manager evicted residents, but I can't say it for sure if it was due to firearms because I never saw the actual eviction notices that went out to residents. But again, between this timeline, the first 2 years, we evicted more than 200 residents from the property. And most of them were prior to our takeover of the site.
Of those 200 people you keep saying you evicted, how many of those were for non-payment?
I can't say the percentage, but there were some in there for non-payment. Most of them were for lease violators and additional occupants and, loud music or what have you. So the managers were responsible for making sure that those evictions took place.
How many of them were for guns?
I can't say for sure, Mr. Brown.
How many of them were for drugs?
I I can't say for sure, Mr. Brown, but I do know everything that you've just mentioned are violations that are clearly defined in our lease agreement.
Can you think of any reason why we wouldn't have those records or why they wouldn't have been provided to us?
I'm sorry, Mr. Brown.
Can you think of any reason why we wouldn't have been provided those records?
I don't know, Mr. Brown. All the lease agreements are kept on site. They're hard copies. We didn't have a digital system in place at Contour Eastwick.
Did you, this request from Bradley for hiring an additional officer. Um, you said Bradley was passionate about the property and I believe passionate about the people at the property as well, right?
Yes, when I first met Bradley, he had a list of maybe 10 to 15 residents that he went on and on about being legacy tenants, as he would say, that were on the property for more than 10 years or so. And he absolutely loved them.
So we can agree that Bradley had the best interests of the tenants at heart. He really cared about them.
For the most part. Again, Mr. Bradley had his moments, but he was a really good employee for the most part. He was passionate.
So when someone is passionate and is knowledgeable about the property as Bradley is making a request for additional security officers, would you agree that's something you should take seriously?
Absolutely. Anyone should take that seriously, Mr. Brown.
This wasn't the last time Bradley asked you for additional security officers, was it?
I don't know, Mr. Brown. I can't say for sure.
Go ahead and share my screen again. This is marked as plaintiffs 3. Take a chance, take a second to read this, familiarize yourself with it, and then I'll have a few questions for you.
Yes, sir. Oh, 1 second. I'm sorry.
I'll just, the second page is
Okay.
just his signature again.
Okay.
All right, so this is email from Bradley Payne once again to you on Friday, August 3rd, 2018, at 11:47 in the morning. Title security team, and who is also CC'd on here is Ralph Stretto. Who's Ralph?
Ralph was working in maintenance, so I'm not sure why he would have been copied on this email, but okay.
But Ralph worked for Contour too, right?
He didn't work for Contour Companies. He was on the development side.
Marshall Rhodes. Who was that?
She was a property manager.
So this email, the first line Bradley mentions, after our meeting this morning. What can you tell me about that meeting?
Well, this was sent to me um, in form of Bradley sharing what happened at the meeting. I was not present at this meeting.
So you know you weren't present at this meeting. Do you know who was?
I'm assuming the people that were copied in this email. I'm not sure. I can't verify.
Let's go to paragraph 4 here. Bradley's referencing the officers, and he mentions there's only 2 officers for a 400 plus unit property, which is deemed a red zone level 3 area. What is a red zone level 3 area?
I do not know, Mr. Brown, what Bradley meant by that.
Well, did you do anything to find out what that meant?
I'm sure I spoke with Bradley, but as we sit here today, I do not know what a red zone level 3 mean.
Can we agree that it doesn't sound good?
I don't know, Mr. Brown. But I did notice that this email was after the first email you showed me. And it looks like he's referencing 2 security or courtesy officers in this email as opposed to the one from the previous email. So maybe we did hire an additional courtesy officer.
Well, if you go to the next paragraph, Bradley is once again asking for another officer so that 3 8-hour shifts
Yeah.
can be done, right?
I do see that.
And if someone as passionate as Bradley and in tune with the needs of the property is asking
Mhm.
for a 3rd security officer, that's something that you should take seriously and something you should give him, right?
That is correct, Mr. Brown. And, I didn't see the same items that he listed in the previous email and this email regarding, um, the issues that the first courtesy officer was having. It just means that he wants more coverage. So I don't see it as, residents and security. The around the clock was our after hours on-call service. And it looks like most of the meeting was regarding the position in which the courtesy officers should take.
But you weren't at that meeting, so were you?
No, sir. Just reading the third paragraph from the bottom in regards to what he wanted the officers to do, check the vacants, pass out notices, help the manager with rent walks and irate residents.
So this request for hiring an additional officer, did you approve that?
I'm not sure, Mr. Brown.
You should have approved it though, right?
Should I have on, it was under what basis, I think, Mr. Brown?
Well, you said that when someone like Bradley, requested this the additional security guard, that's something that you should take seriously and something you should have given him, right?
From the first email to this email, when he referenced the one courtesy officer, and now in this email in the third, fourth paragraph, him referencing two courtesy officers. And then in the following email, the following paragraph, referencing still needing an additional courtesy officer for the reasons of passing out notices, helping the manager with rent walks, checking the vacant units. I think maybe the manager may have spoken with Bradley on how to allocate the time for the courtesy officers that were on site. But I was not at that meeting. No, sir, Mr. Brown.
Well, Ms. Dia, we can agree that in this email, Bradley references two courtesy officers, right?
Yes, sir.
And he's saying they're working 12-hour shifts, right?
Yes, sir.
How many courtesy officers worked at once?
I can't say for sure. I did not do the scheduling, Mr. Brown.
Did they work 7 days a week?
I do not know, Mr. Brown, without looking at their payroll schedule and the details from payroll.
And these two officers that he references were responsible for a property with over 400 units, right?
Yes.
And he's saying that there's another resident that's interested in coming on staff as a security officer. And he's asking you or telling you that we need another officer on the property. So we need 3, right?
Yes, he's saying that he has one guy that lives on the property, and he's going to try him out for 1 week on a trial basis to see his performance.
So you would have approved this request to bring on a third security officer?
I'm sure the property manager would have reviewed that with Bradley and worked the details out for on-site staffing.
You said the property manager will work it out with Bradley, but here in his email signature, he still says he's the property manager, right?
I do see that. Yes, Mr. Brown.
Well, Ms. D, you would have, if you said the property manager would have worked it out with him, and, worked out the staffing, why would your response have then been no new hires this time?
We were not on a hire shut-off, Mr. Brown, and Marshall Rose, a on-site property manager, would have been spearheading that decision with Mr. Bradley.
Well, it looks like the decision's already made. You're their supervisor, and you said no new hires this time, right?
Did I? I don't recall reading that, Mr. Brown.
Your response is on the screen.
That looks like,
Hi, Ms. Villa. I have just a few questions to ask you in follow-up. Do you know approximately when you learned recently that you would be given a deposition today?
yes, that would have been, I believe it was last week. Yes.
Have you seen those 3 exhibits that you were just shown in the approximately 5 years since your deposition?
I have not, Mr. Sager.
All right. And Ms. Dia, I've circulated in advance of this deposition, both to you and to Mr. Brown, 2 exhibits, the first of which we'll mark as exhibit number 1, which is the lease agreement for 384 Eastwick Circle, which is Bates numbers Contour Eastwick 001722-001730. And I would just ask if you have that, a copy of that in front of you.
Yes, sir, I do.
And is exhibit 1, and we'll provide a copy of this to our court reporter, is this a true and correct copy of the lease agreement relating to 384 Eastwick Circle in Decatur, Georgia, for the lease extending from September 18, 20, excuse me, the terms are December 28, 2018, ending on November 30, 2019?
Correct, yes.
And if you look over on page 5 of the lease, and that's Bates 001726. Can you tell us who signed on behalf of Contour Eastwick?
Mr. Bradley Payne.
Okay. And what's the date of that signature?
It is the 28th of December, 2018.
And then there are also signatures by the residents. Can you read their names there on that same page?
Shanika Benton and Romello Harris.
And was this lease agreement that we have in front of you as exhibit number 1, is that something that was made as part of the regular business activity of Contour Eastwick and leasing apartment units at this time in 2017, 2018, and 2019?
Yes, sir.
And was it kept and maintained in the regular and ordinary course of Contour Eastwick's business activity?
Yes.
And there are several addendums, and I would ask you to look at the last page of this exhibit, page 9, Contour Eastwick Bates number 001730. What is that particular addendum?
This document is our drug-free housing addendum.
Okay, what was the purpose of the drug-free housing addendum?
The purpose of us making this an actual addendum was to make sure that we addressed any criminal activity as well as drug activity from the property.
And What does it state in number 6 on that same page?
It says violation of the above provisions shall be a material violation of the lease and good cause for immediate termination of tenancy.
And is that drug-free housing addendum signed by the same residents on December 28, 2018?
Yes, sir. Shanika Benton and Romello Harris.
And there's a signature there at the bottom. It says by owner. Do you know whose signature that is?
That would have been one of the leasing agents, Jennifer Bentley.
Okay. And that has the same date, December 28, 2018.
Yes, sir. Correct.
All right. Also, you have in front of you what we'll mark as exhibit number 2, a 2-page document entitled Community Policies and Procedures, Bates number Contour Eastwick 001794 and 001795. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Tell us what that is, please.
This is an overall reminder of the community policies to the residents for all occupants and or also their guests and any leaseholders that we have a zero tolerance for drug activity, criminal activity, anything of the like with the lease violations. And then it also specifies that with our zero tolerance, there's a 24-hour eviction given to residents that are caught in violation of criminal activity and drug activity.
And if you look at page 2 of that document, are there the same signatures on behalf of the residents?
Yes, sir, at the bottom.
And do you see the same signature by Jennifer Bentley?
Yes, sir.
I think that's all I have. Thank you, Ms. Dia.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Dia, just a couple quick follow-up questions and we'll be done.
Yes.
Your lawyer pointed out to you that you hadn't seen the documents that I showed you. You haven't seen those in quite some time, right?
Correct.
Now, you understand that the way we got those emails is because we asked for them, your company provided them to your lawyers, and your lawyers gave them to us, right?
Would assume that's how you got them, Mr. Brown.
And I couldn't talk to you before this deposition, right?
Correct.
And I couldn't show you these things ahead of time to, tell you I'm going to ask you about them, right?
Correct.
But there was nothing stopping you from looking at your emails, right?
Correct.
So the reason you didn't see them is not because of me, but it's because you didn't look in your email, right?
No, not so, Mr. Brown, only because, again, I did not know that we would be here 4 years after. That was in 2018 when those emails were out. And to be honest, I just don't remember everything that was said or done or typed. I can't even remember, what my niece gave me for my birthday 5 years ago. So it's just one of those things, and I do apologize if my answers were not perfect for you today. But again, my first deposition, I was extremely nervous, and for those documents, I had not seen them in years.
So we should rely on what's in those emails then, right?
Several of the emails that you showed me was one-sided. It didn't show an email response from me, and I don't know if I responded to those emails, and I'm sure that I had in one way, shape, or form, either with the property manager and or addressing it with the manager to address it with her on-site staff, which would have been Mr. Bradley Payne at that time.